attorney Veronica McClendon. I'm based out of Macon, Georgia, and I am the owner and CEO of McClendon Law and Consulting. My firm is, my goal with this firm is to be a resource to people as they are on their wealth building and their legacy leaving journey. I want to help people to know what their options are, to know what things they can do to leave the kind of legacy that they want to leave for their family. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I think we're going to have a really great conversation. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and I got some slides. One day I might stop presenting with slides, but I like to have slides because it kind of keeps me focused. And then I'm hoping it'll also help those who are watching to stay focused as well. So we're going to pull those up in just a minute. What we're talking about today is the topic of your legacy won't build itself. And this is a topic that I presented to a group of developers, people who are in real estate, building properties, and just wanted to operate on a higher level as they're entering that space. And so I did this presentation for them, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring it back to the people who I'm connected with as part of my firm, in case it's helpful to you. So I know that everybody watching is not going to be a business owner. Everybody's not going to be a real estate developer. Everybody is not working in construction, and that is perfectly fine. The information that I'm sharing is going to start out kind of being more so for business owners, but as we keep going, it's going to be something that's helpful for everybody. And also, you just never know. Like right now, you may not own a business. You may not be doing anything of that nature, but in the future, you might be, or you might run across somebody who ends up doing that in the future. So I always aim to be a resource and just kind of expose people to information and topics they may not have known before. So we're going to go ahead and get started on this. I'm going to pull up my slides now. And so just bear with me as I get those ready. And if you have any questions that you already want to share, anything that you want to put in the chat, I am welcoming that. I want this to be interactive to the extent that it can be. Of course, we can't just have questions all day, but if there are ways that we can be interactive, I definitely want to do that. So we're going to go ahead and get into this content. I am going to minimize so that only my face is seen. And we're going to get into this information. So like I said, feel free to put stuff in the chat if you have questions or anything. As far as my folks watching on Facebook and YouTube, if you have questions, you can put those in the comments as well. I can't guarantee that I will see them right now, but I will take some time at the end of the webinar to address those questions in the comments if I can. So definitely just let me know what questions you have, and we're going to get into it tonight. So again, just for anybody who's just tuning in, I am Veronica McClendon. I am an attorney, and I am the CEO and founder of McClendon Law and Consulting in Macon, Georgia. Our firm can only work with Georgia clients in terms of legal representation, but the information that we're going to share tonight, my hope is that it's valuable for people no matter where they are, because we're going to keep it kind of general. We're not going to get into Georgia specifics, although some of the information I share might be more relevant for Georgia business owners or just people who are looking into their estate planning. But if it's anything that you have any follow-up questions on, if you're a Georgia attorney, we will be, not Georgia attorney, but a Georgia resident, we will talk about how you can learn more from me in the future or get connected with me on a clarity call to learn more about working with my firm. But, you know, you also could talk with an attorney in your community if you are from another state. And hopefully this presentation, this webinar will give you some information that you will find helpful. So again, we're talking about your legacy won't build itself. Legal tools that business owners need to generate wealth, to create generational wealth. And as I mentioned before, if you're not a business owner, stay tuned because I think you'll still find it relevant. I try to keep it kind of general, but there are some nuggets that business owners may find valuable. So without further ado, we're going to get into this. So just a little bit about my firm. We are unique in that we work with farmers and landowners in particular. We also serve our small business owners, but anybody who is legacy driven, anybody who wants to work with a firm that's going to help them to think about the big picture when it comes to what they're building in this lifetime and what they plan to leave behind. My firm is that kind of firm. That's what we talk about. We're not going to just fill out some paperwork for you. We're not going to just do what you ask us to do. We're going to ask you questions and make sure that what we create for you, what we accomplish for you, is exactly what you're wanting to do. So I always, when I talk with anybody, I like to get them thinking about their why, because all of the information that I'm sharing here is only going to be relevant to you if you are thinking about your why in the process of it. So I really want you all to be thinking, okay, what is my why? What is my why? Why am I doing this everything? Like, why am I waking up in the morning? Why am I going to work every day? What mouths am I trying to feed? Am I trying to just feed the people in front of me right now, or do I have a generational perspective on what I'm doing? Do I want to build something today that's going to sustain beyond my lifetime? All of those questions can help get you thinking in that right direction about estate planning, legacy, succession planning. We got to have all of those things in our mind when we're doing this process, because it's not just a check the box kind of thing. It's really something that can help you get focused and grounded as you think about the next steps you're going to take in your life. So for example, you might be someone who says, I don't want my children to have to start from scratch just like I did. I want to give them something that they can take from me and continue to build upon. So you might think, I'm not a business owner now, but what is a business that I can get into, that I can start to learn about, understand, and then at some point launch, so that when my children come, they can either sell the business and make money from that, or they can get into the business while I'm still here, learn the trade, and then get into it and have their own business once they're ready. So really understanding your why can help you to stay focused and help you to know exactly what you're trying to accomplish. So just here again, like when you're building a legacy, it's going to require planning. You're not going to just say, oh, like I woke up and then look at all this. Like it's going to be, what am I setting out to do? What am I setting out to create? Who am I trying to impact with my planning? So you want to have some things documented. Just say, and I say this because I talk to a lot of people who are like, my kids know what to do. Everybody knows what to do. And I'm like, if it's not in writing, it just might as well just not be, because I've seen too many situations where people just forget what mama told them, what daddy told them when it's time to deal with the estate. And everybody has a different perspective about what mama wanted, what daddy wanted. And so we got to put some stuff in writing in order to have a solid plan that's going to sustain beyond our lifetime. And so as a business owner, there are certain legal tools you'll need, and there's more legal tools in here, but I just wanted to cover a few of these things so that you can be thinking in the right direction. When I work with my clients, it's always a process. We're going to get A, B, and C done for you in this phase, but you're going to need to come back to me for D, E, and F, or go to somebody else for D, E, and F, because when you're a business owner, it's going to be an ongoing process to make sure you have the legal structure in place and everything as well to make sure that your business is legally solid and sound. So the things that we're highlighting today are a business entity, an estate plan, and a succession plan. And we'll talk about the differences between those different elements for a business. So first, the business entity. We're going to talk about that first, because a lot of times people are starting their business and they're just like, I'm a business owner. I'm going to just get out there and just start selling stuff. And that's fine to a degree. But at some point, you're going to want to separate your business from your personal self. And we'll talk about why that's helpful in just a moment. But first, we're going to talk about the types of business entities. These are the main types. There might be others that I didn't list here, especially if you're in other states. There are other ways that you can describe these types of entities. But for the purposes tonight, the different types of entities, or I probably should have labeled it business structures, would be sole proprietorship and general partnership. Those are two that are not really entities, but they are a way of doing business that doesn't require as much paperwork. Basically, what you are doing is, if you're a sole proprietorship, you're just somebody going out there and doing business under, you might have a business name, but you as the individual are you own the business outright. You are the business. There's no separation between you as a person and your business. And this can be a little risky in ways that we'll talk about in a moment. But basically, your name is going to be on all of the business paperwork, and you are doing business as, ABC Bakery or whatever the name of your business might be. A general partnership is very similar in that it is owned by the individuals outright, but it's going to be more than one individual. So with a sole proprietorship, you are the only owner. A general partnership is going to be you and at least one other person. And the business is in your names individually. You might be partners. You might even have some paperwork between the two of you, but you don't have anything that separates the ownership of your business from your personal self. And then you have a limited liability partnership, which is a little bit more structured than that general partnership. In that sense, you will have those partners, but you also have limited partners, and you have a general partner. And that requires a little bit more documentation in order to put that kind of arrangement in place. It also is going to require some filings with the, actually, I should have checked on this. I don't do many limited liability partnerships. In fact, I haven't done any yet, but I think that these actually might be registered with the Superior Court. So that's something we're going to have to get back on that. But a limited liability partnership is a structure where you have limited partners and you have general partners. So a limited partner is someone who they might be investing money and resources for the partnership, but they're not going to be holding the liability. So holding liability means that if something were to happen and someone sued the business, then if you are if you are a general partner, then you just all out there. Like your assets, your personal assets and your business assets could all be taken because it's something that could touch you as an individual. But if you're a limited partner, then the amount that it can harm you is going to be limited to what you own in the business. So for example, let's say that you have a limited liability partnership, you have your limited partners, you have your general partners. The limited partners, they're usually the investors who are sitting in the background and just hoping to see their money grow. The general partner is the one who's out there doing the work. They're signing the contracts. They are the ones that are bringing in the labor. So let's say that we're trying to build a building, and the limited partners are just the investors. The general partner, if anything went wrong, they're building the building and it fell on somebody and then they're suing the partnership, the general partner can suffer some serious financial consequences because their liability is not going to be limited within this partnership. But the limited partners, their liability is only going to go to whatever they have in that business. So their house, their car, their personal assets are not going to be impacted. Only whatever money they've invested in the business would be at risk. But beyond the business, then they would be protected. A limited liability company is similar, but everybody who's involved in a limited liability company has that limited liability, which means that your personal assets are protected, or if you have other businesses, those will be protected as long as they're not part of that limited liability company or the LLC. So it limits your liability to the extent that you own a share of that company. So again, that same example with a construction site and something goes wrong and someone sues the company, they can't take everything from you. They only can take what you have invested in that limited liability company. So this is a tool that a lot of people like to use because it provides that protection against your personal assets or other assets outside of the limited liability company. You have to form a limited liability company with the Secretary of State. and you'll have to pay annual registration fees and things like that to keep it up to date. And you also want to make sure, and I think we're going to talk about this in the next slide, but you want to make sure that if you have your LLC, that you're doing everything for that LLC within that LLC. You have a bank account specifically for that LLC. You're not dibbling and dabbling. I got to pay my rent at home from the LLC. You're keeping those resources separate so that that liability will remain separate. Otherwise, if you got sued, then the court might say, you know what, you really treat that LLC just like it's your personal property. So we're going to let somebody else get at that too, because you dabble in it when you need it. And so the people that you owe money to, they can dabble in it too when you owe them money. So you want to make sure you keep your business separate from your personal. And so that's why I mentioned earlier with this sole proprietorship, the general partnership, those are situations where you're doing business as yourself. You have not taken measures to separate yourself from your business. And that means everything that you own personally, as well as what you own with the business, are lumped in under the same ownership umbrella. And that will put your assets at risk if there was a situation that arose either on a personal front that can impact your business. If it happened on the business front, it can impact your personal. These other two options, the S Corp. S Corp is kind of like a hybrid between a limited liability company and a corporation, and it allows you to avoid some of the self-employment taxes that you might get with the limited liability company. At least here in Georgia and in other states as well, a lot of times you will have a limited liability company, but you'll be taxed as an S Corp. And so you would get those tax benefits of the S Corp, but your structure would be the LLC. And then the next one is the corporation. A corporation is another situation where you have a business that's separate from you as a person. And you might have shareholders, which are people who can expect to receive some profits from this corporation. And you also will have a board of directors, which are the people who make decisions for the corporation. And so I actually am not like your corporations expert just yet. Most of my clients go with the limited liability company because they tend to be more beneficial for newer business owners or smaller business owners. So I'll say that to say I'm not going to speak too specifically about corporations, but they have some tax benefits that people like, but it's really once you get to making a whole lot of money when it makes sense to have something like a corporation, because you really don't take advantage of those tax benefits until you're making a certain level of money. And then also there's a certain level of control that you can lose with the corporation that may not be ideal for your typical small business owner because they want to be able to control what they've created. I know y'all have heard those stories about the board fired the person who owned the company or the person who started the company. The board decided they're going to fire them. You see that a lot with corporations more so because the board is really driving the decisions for the company on that higher level. And if they think that you are not the best for the company, even though you may have been the founder, they can tell you to go. So those are some business entity types. I know I kind of went deep on those. But again, this is just a slide to reiterate what I mentioned before about separating your assets to limit your liability. You don't want to have your personal property, your real estate, and your businesses all under your personal umbrella, because as I mentioned before, that puts everything at risk. If somebody slips and falls on your land, then that's going to put your personal accounts at risk, your home. If you have other businesses, that can put that at risk. And so sometimes it can be helpful to separate your assets. And so you have your personal, everything under your personal name. It might be your residence, your vehicles, bank accounts, things that you use on a daily basis for your family. And you might also own real estate. So this could be not necessarily your personal real estate, but business real estate. You might have, me, I'm a law firm owner, so I might have a building for my law firm, or you may be someone who's a real estate investor and you have several properties that you own that and lease out to people, or you use them for other purposes. You don't want to have that under your personal name, because that can put your personal assets at risk. And if something happened with one of those buildings, then it could ruin you financially altogether. And then your businesses as well. If you have multiple businesses, like you a caterer on one side, and then on the other side you're an accountant, you want to keep those separate, have separate entities for those two businesses, and keep all of the bank accounts separate from your personal and also separate from each other, just so that you can make sure that there's no confusion about whether or not these are the same business. Because if you keep them all under the same umbrella, again, if something goes wrong with one, your bakery, somebody gets sick and they sue you, then that can ruin your CPA business, or it can ruin your personal assets. So you want to make sure that you keep those things separate and operate them as separate entities. So I have here a few things that you can do to maintain your limited liability if you have something set up like an LLC or a corporation. You want to make sure you manage your risk within reason. And that just means don't go out there and just take on all kinds of risky endeavors, because if the more risky things you do, the more at risk you put your finances. So, you want to make sure that when you're making business decisions and making deals, that you don't tie up everything into certain situations. Make sure that you keep your risk managed within reason. Second thing is you want to have governing documents for each entity. You want to make sure that you have something in place to say, this is how this entity is going to be run. This is how I'm going to have this the board for this particular entity, or this is the management team for this particular entity. This is what happens if I'm not able to run this business. Have that laid out for each entity that you've created, so that it's clear that they all have their own independent structure. The next thing, let me make sure that I can see that, is that I mentioned this before, is you want to have separate bank accounts and separate financial accounts for your personal and each business entity. You want to have separate insurance. And also you want to make sure that you have good contracts in place when you're doing business under any of these entities, because a contract is going to be what actually says that, when you're working with other people, whether they're partners within your entity or people that you're contracting with, you want to make sure that the parameters of what you can and can't do and what everybody owes everybody is clear. Because if it's not clear, then that leaves room for confusion and the possibility of lawsuits. And that's not a great way to manage risks. So we talked about business entities that are related to owning a business. And that's, again, business structures, the way that you can structure the ownership of your business. And now we're going to talk about estate and succession planning, which might be a little bit more universal for people, even if they are not business owners. So again, this is my general estate planning information. I think if you own anything, then this is helpful to you. First thing, when we're talking about estate and succession planning, I always like to define what is an estate, because I know for me, and I think a lot of people are this way, they thought estates were just like what rich people had, or they kind of imagine like this beautiful green, just pastures and rolling hills. And, you might think if you go somewhere and it's something estates, and you see like a visual for an estate. And so you might think, well, that's not me, that's somebody else. Well, an estate is all of the money and property that a person owns at the time of their death. And so everybody's going to own something at the time of their death, whether if it's a $10 or, $100 million, you're going to own something. And so you want to have a plan in place for what happens to the things that you own. So an estate plan is a person's written instructions for how their money and property should be distributed after they die, caring and providing for minor children or other dependent loved ones, making healthcare and financial decisions for the person while they're alive, but unable to handle their own affairs. And this is something that a lot of people just don't really think about, but anybody could end up in a situation either on a permanent basis or even a temporary basis where there's an accident or an illness that leaves them unable to handle their own finances. And so they need to have somebody else in place who can do that for them. And also it is managing your personal affairs or business responsibilities in the event of death or medical incapacity. And so when we're talking about estate planning, we're typically passing on those personal assets, our house, cars, bank accounts, family rings, and antique furniture, whatever it is that you may own. But it's also planning in the event of incapacity and planning for long-term care. That's something that a lot of people don't think as much about, but it's becoming more and more of an issue because long-term care expenses, and when I say long-term care, I mean nursing home, I mean long-term care in the home, having someone come in the home to care for someone who is not able to provide their own care 100%. It's very expensive. Like, think about it. When you, a lot of times people these days, they have home health care agents, and this is someone who, well, not an agent, but someone who's coming and provide home health care. This is someone who's at your house 40 hours a week. And so to pay a whole salary for somebody can be pretty costly. And just to do that is enough to make someone bankrupt. And so planning for that is important to make sure that those sources are available if you needed care in your older age or if you became disabled. As a business owner, there are a few more things you want to consider. You have business assets, you have buildings, you have computers, you have a contract could be an asset, all kinds of things that a business may own. You have your operation. This is how your business does things. And for some, you may have trade secrets. You may have processes and procedures that you have patented or trademarked, things like that. That you want to make sure are protected, and then passing on the knowledge base. That's the how you do the things that you do. As far as business assets, we're talking again about real estate, bank accounts, websites, other online assets, because some websites are worth a lot of money just because of the traffic that they bring and information that they provide, or whatever you can access through that website. That could be a valuable online asset. Even your domain name. I had somebody tell me how they had a website and then they closed their website and they gave up their rights to their domain name, and now someone wants to sell it back to them for $3,000. So that's the thing. People, if they think that your domain name is valuable, they're gonna want to try to get you to buy it. So that's something that having that rights to that is valuable. Contracts, licenses, permits, those can be things that make or break a business. If you might have a business that you pass on, but if the contract doesn't survive along with the business, then that could be a critical factor in whether or not that business actually survives. Intellectual property, products and goods, these are all things that as business owners, you may have or develop at some point. And so you want to make sure that those are part of your estate plan. Passing on that operation, the business, how you're doing the things you do, processes and systems, your human capital, the people who make it run, who keep things going. You're not selling the people, of course, but you're passing on the people who work for this business. They go to continue to work for the business under new owners. There's ways that you have to do that, and that needs to be part of your estate plan or succession plan. And then that knowledge base, the who, the what, the when, the where, the how. What are you doing? How you do it? I work with a lot of farmers, and I always say, hey, if you're a farmer and you pass the farm to some children, they'll know what to do. But other children, they're going to be clueless. They don't know how to feed cows. Is this for the cows? Is this for the goats? And, whatever, whatever farmers are having to do, that's something that's specialized knowledge. And the same for any business owner. A lot of times you're going to have specialized knowledge that you need to pass to the next generation. And again, I had little sneaky things in here. It says farm, but it could be for any business. So let's talk a little bit about how we create an estate plan. And just to make it clear, I lumped estate and succession planning in together. To some extent, they are very similar processes, but just to kind of differentiate, an estate plan usually deals with your personal assets. So I'm a business owner. I have my own estate plan. So that means that when I pass, all of my property, like my house, car, bank accounts, those things will go according to my estate planning. But then we also have my business. And I have to make sure that if I want my business to live after I'm gone, or even after I retire, that there's a plan in place. And so that's the succession plan. And I think as an attorney, I have a good example because my husband, he's not a lawyer. He's not an attorney, so he would not be able to take on my law practice. So if I want the law firm to continue, I have to have a succession plan. I have to have a plan that says, this is how you make sure that another lawyer ends up with this practice. Because if I just left it to my husband as part of my estate plan, you can say in your estate plan, you can say, any businesses I own, this is how I want them to be distributed. But if I just left my law firm in my estate plan, then there's no clear path about who is going to be the next lawyer to own the firm. So it's very important as a business owner, you have separate documentation that shows how your business is going to transfer. For those who are not lawyers and other professionals with these rules, like doctors may have similar rules, you can pass the ownership of your business in your estate plan, but as far as who runs the business, it's part of your succession plan. So I hope that's kind of clear. We'll talk about some of the estate planning tools because everybody may not know. And I did my best to fix this slide. I guess I didn't do it right. I see what I did wrong. Next time I'll fix it. Anyway, estate planning documents that you might include in your estate plan could be a will, or it could be a trust, or it could be a will and a trust. And you can have multiple trusts. Advanced Directive for Healthcare. And other states may call it a healthcare power of attorney, or there's some other words, that other states may use. But here in Georgia, we call it Advanced Directive for Healthcare. Other states may call it healthcare power of attorney or other terminology. We have a financial power of attorney, also called a durable power of attorney. And that's something that deals with your finances. So Advanced Directive for Healthcare, if you got to a place where you're not able to communicate with your doctor concerning your healthcare wishes, you can have that in place where that you can say who will make medical decisions for you. And you also can say under certain circumstances, these are the decisions that I would want made. And then for the financial power of attorney, you get to put somebody in charge of your finances so that they can make financial decisions for you if you're not able to. And this is important. Even if you are married and you want your spouse to handle everything for you, because as I said in another thing the other day, these days people more so see you as an individual. And so if you want your individual affairs to be handled when you're not able to handle them, you need to have legal documentation to show that. They're not going to just assume that just because you're married that you want your spouse to handle everything for you. Now, if there are joint assets and things, then yes, your spouse would be able to handle it for you. But if it's something that's solely in your name, then under most circumstances, they're going to need a financial power of attorney just like anybody else. And I spent a little time on this because I've had situations where I worked with clients who are in this hard situation where they may have had an arrangement where like they had some bills on their bank account, their spouse had some bills on their bank accounts, they had separate accounts, they may have even had a joint account, but it's usually not going to have as much money as their individual accounts may have for whatever reason. Everybody has their own reasons, but they need their spouse's money to pay the bills that the spouse always pays, and they don't have access to it. And so then they're not able to pay their bills because their spouse is incapacitated or sick, and they need access to their bank accounts. So again, you want to make sure that you have a financial power of attorney in place, regardless of whether or not you're married, because your spouse is not going to automatically be able to do things for you. And I want to note that the Advance Directive for Healthcare and Financial Power of Attorney, those are documents that are going to be in place while you are alive and you're unable to handle your affairs. But after a person dies, it has to be dealt with their will or their trust. Your estate planning documents might also include life insurance and other benefits. And I just put a little plug. I think it's going to be tomorrow. I'm going to be talking with Jason Lee about Life Insurance Awareness Month, because September is Life Insurance Awareness Month. So just want to put that out there as well. But you can tune in for conversation on that, I think tomorrow or Friday. I got to get that detail put in place. Let's go back. Funeral arrangements, that could be part of your estate plan. And then I have here operating agreement or partnership agreement, buy-sell agreements. Those are typically going to be in the business realm, but I put them here because they can go hand in hand with your estate planning documents. I should have done that a long time ago. So thirsty. All right, so let's talk about some reasons that people create trust. One of those reasons may be privacy. They don't want people in their business. And just to make it a little bit more specific, where this might come into play is that you might want to leave cash to somebody. And this is in your estate plan. So after you're gone, you don't care about privacy at that point, but you know that the people who come after you will care about privacy. So if you left, one of your nieces or nephews some money, you may not want everybody to know it for whatever reason. So especially people like creditors, you don't want to just put it out there like, I just left my son $20,000. So y'all know where to go if y'all want to get y'all's money. Like you don't want to just put it out there in the public. So you might want to have a trust for that, because a trust is going to be a private document that only the people who need to see are going to have access to. If you have a will, when you go to probate, it's going to be out there on Front Street. You're going to put it through probate court. It becomes a public document that pretty much anybody can access and see what's going on. So, and y'all see it, like, I know sometimes when I'll probate an estate, then I'll start getting letters on behalf of my client who has filed this, open this probate for a loved one. They're like, oh, we saw that your client is the administrator of this estate. Like, do they want to sell this house? Do they want to sell this, that? That people start reaching out. There are people who are watching to see what's being filed. And, some people might look and say, oh, Joe Schmo, he got some money. He owe me some money. So I'll be looking out for that cash. But if you have a trust, then there's no way of them knowing that. You may have beneficiaries that are minors or disabled, and you don't want to give them money outright. If they are disabled, it could mess up other benefits that they receive to help provide for their daily needs, and you don't want to mess that up. So you might leave things to them in a trust. And also, just a minor or a disabled person may not be able to manage the money on their own, especially children. Like, you don't need to leave children money outright. In fact, you just can't. Legally, if you leave a child above a certain amount of money, then usually the court is going to require that it either go into a trust or that a conservator be put in place over that money. So you can't leave money directly to a minor person, and for an adult who's disabled, it may not make sense to do that for one or more reasons. Spendthrift beneficiaries, and those are people who, just trying to think, you might not want to trust them with a lot of money, or they may have a lot of bills and you don't want the money you leave them to just go paying their bills. You actually want them to be able to benefit from it. So you might put in a trust that protects them from creditors. In capacity planning, there are a lot of different ways this might come into play. We mentioned earlier long-term care as a possible need, that you want to be able to afford long-term care. And you also want to make sure that if you were to get assistance for long-term care, some people would want to put some plans in place so that the state can't come and take their assets after they're gone. So they might want to have some kind of plans in place to protect in the event of their incapacity. And actually, that's the next two, that's two down from what I just mentioned: long-term care planning and asset protection. The incapacity planning that I'm talking about here is more so having a trustee in place to manage your property if you're not able to. So, when you create a revocable trust, that's usually the foundation for an estate plan. It's either going to be a revocable trust or a will. If you have a revocable trust-based plan, then you would be the trustee when that trust is created. However, you will also name successor trustees, which are people who can step into place pretty much in a seamless way after you get to a place where you're not able to manage your own affairs anymore. So just as an example, someone may create a revocable trust, they're the initial trustee, but then they develop dementia. And so then that incapacity planning kicks in, and they'll have a successor trustee to take over without having to go to court and go through all these different processes. Some people will create trusts for holding and managing property for future generations. They might say, I want to make sure that this property is around after I'm gone, and maybe even a generation after that. And so they might create certain types of trusts to hold and manage the property for the benefit of future generations. I mean, not something over. Finally, they might just want to avoid probate. They might just say, I don't want my family to have to deal with probate. It's kind of a way to fund the whole process up front. So they say, okay, I'm going to create a trust. I'm going to put everything in this trust. My family won't have to pay money for probate. They might not even have to pay a lawyer or anybody to help administer the trust, but it could be helpful at least to get a consultation. But they can avoid probate by having a trust. If you die without an estate plan, then everything you own is going to be distributed to your heirs at law. And that's going to be based on state law. Every state is going to treat this entirely differently. And so if you don't have a will, then state law will determine how your property gets split up. If you have a judge, they're going to appoint someone to administer your estate. That means that you don't get to choose who's over your estate. The judge would choose for you. And it may not be who you would want it to be. A judge doesn't know your family. They just know who comes before them and says they want to be over your estate. They know who comes in the best dressed, the smoothest talker. But it may not be that one that you will want to put in place. So if you want to be in control, you have to have an estate plan. If you have minor children, then a judge is going to decide who takes custody of your minor children. And the same for if you leave your children any money, then the judge is going to decide who gets to manage their assets for them. And a lot of times this just sounds like, okay, I see. But as an attorney who actually walks families through this process, it can be really stressful. It costs more money when you have minor children and you have to appoint guardians ad litem. And sometimes you have to file separate petitions in court. So in order to open an estate for someone who has died, you have to file a petition. But then if any of their heirs are underage or certain situations are at play and there was no will, then you might have to file another petition to deal with that particular person. So those are things that, it's just really important to think about, because it can be stressful for a family to not have things in place. When you have a plan, it keeps you in the driver's seat. You decide in advance how things will go. That burden is taken off of your family, and it helps you to maximize the value of the assets that you pass on. It also allows you to leave a legacy that outlives you. When I talk to people about estate planning, I encourage them to shift their thinking. I have this quote by Russell Wilson, who's a football player. He said, "I truly believe in positive synergy, that your positive mindset gives you a more hopeful outlook, and belief that you can do something great means you will do something great." And if you see your estate plan as a part of your legacy, as a way to make a difference in the world, to leave this world better than what you found it, and to help people in your family to kind of be able to keep going from where you started, then estate planning is a lot more of a pleasant experience. I encourage people to look at it as an opportunity. When you view estate planning as an opportunity, you gain power for yourself and the people you care about most. So you get to provide financially for them, offer clear guidance about what you want done with your final affairs. You have a potential increase of wealth. See, I don't confuse myself. Wealth growth potential increase. Y'all see, I was trying to just use that W. The potential for your wealth to grow increases. And I say that not that you may not see it in your own lifetime, but the people after you will get to benefit from what you've created in a way that they would not be able to benefit if you did not have an estate plan. You get to escape the pitfalls of heirs property. If you know me, you know I talk about heirs property all the time because that is the gift that has been handed me. Heirs property is when someone dies and they leave land or house or whatever to more than one family member. And then as each generation goes on, more and more people in that family are owning this property. And so I see it a lot in cities where it might be grandma's house, great granddaddy's house that's been in the family for a few generations. And now it's starting to fall apart. And we're trying to figure out how we can get some repairs made and actually benefit from this house, rent it out or something. But when you don't have estate planning in place, it gets harder to determine who gets to benefit from that in the future. It also reduces the chances of family conflict because y'all done watched Medea, y'all done watched a lot of Black movies, Soul Food. Y'all have seen what happens when families have someone die. Everybody comes looking for their check, and nobody wants to put in to keep things going. I gotta watch Soul Food again. I don't think I've seen it as an adult, but I saw a clip and I was like, this is good fodder for talking about estate planning and just what happens when things aren't clear. But we'll talk about that later. Got my wheels churning. View estate planning as a gift, and this is an acronym. Establish your goals, create an inventory, select your fiduciaries, assemble your team of advisors. When you're establishing your goals, that's beginning with the end in mind. Stephen Covey. You have a vision and you're casting it so that your beneficiaries can pick up that torch where you leave off and keep running. So what you're doing is not just for you, it's for the people who come behind you. And it gives them a leg up. I know my pastor always says, my kids ain't going to have to get out the mud. And I don't know exactly where that reference comes from, but essentially what he's saying is, I've done a lot to get into a better place in life. So my kids are not going to have to come back to where I am and do the same things I did to get to a better place. They're going to be at that better place starting off, and then they get to go a little bit further for their children. I is creating inventory. This is where you just get a list of everything you own. Any real property, cash, bank accounts, investment accounts, business assets, vehicles, valuable personal property, your business interests, all that stuff. You want to get an inventory so that you know what you own, you know how much it's worth, and it helps you in your planning process. I have a lot of clients who they go through this process and they're like, wow, I'm actually like almost a multi-millionaire. I'm almost a millionaire, or I'm a multi-millionaire. I didn't realize it. Because once you start adding everything up, then it can be really interesting to see what you actually own. So you want to have that inventory, and that'll help you. Like you're not like, I don't know, what do I want to leave? It's like you know exactly what you have, and you can talk with your attorney to be strategic about how you're going to divide those assets up. Select your fiduciaries. These are the people who are going to be in charge of carrying out your wishes. Executors for your wills, for your will, trustees for any trust you create, legal guardians for minor children, legal guardians or conservators in the case that you're incapacitated, and agents to handle your finances, your healthcare decisions, whatever it is that you may need. Assemble your team of advisors. These are your attorneys, financial advisors, insurance agents, real estate experts, business consultants. If you're a farmer, you want to have somebody who is an expert on farm businesses. Get those people together. They might all be together. They might do their own part separately, but you want to have them as part of that planning process to help you create a plan that's going to help you actually accomplish the goals that you have. You need to select your attorney. Just a little note about that. Choose an estate planning attorney. And I put emphasis on that because all attorneys are not estate planning attorneys, and you don't want any attorney doing your will or your trust. It's kind of a specialized area of practice. So you want to get someone who has that estate planning expertise. I'm not saying that other lawyers can't do wills, but there's, especially now, the arena of estate planning has evolved so much that there's a lot that goes into it, that if someone is not specializing in this area, it might be hard for them to properly advise you. And so there's issues like planning around retirement benefits. The laws have changed recently around retirement benefits and what happens when you leave retirement benefits to a trust, providing for family members with special needs, long-term care planning, succession planning for your, I don't know, business, I'm assuming I was trying to say, but didn't put that out there, but succession planning for your business or farm or whatever it might be. You want to choose someone that you feel comfortable with, someone who understands and appreciates your personal, familial, and cultural values. This is very important. They don't have to be just like you, but you want somebody who understands where you're coming from. And the example I like to give is if you are in South Georgia and you have a farm and you need help with creating an estate plan to leave your farm to your children. You got some children who live on the farm with you. You have some children who live in Atlanta and they are working in finance or something where they don't want to have anything to do with the farm. Someone who has a practice in Atlanta and works primarily with suburban folks who own a house and cars and a few bank accounts, they may not be as privy to the kinds of things that an attorney who works with farmers would be. So you want to make sure that you get someone who can help you in that situation. And you want to here's some pitfalls that you want to avoid when you're estate planning. You don't want to unintentionally create heirs property. We talked about that earlier. And what I mean by that is a lot of times people do a will and they'll say, well, the only thing I own is my house, so I'm just going to leave it to my 4 kids. And they don't give any instructions about how those 4 kids are supposed to share one house. They don't give any clear guidance about whether it should be sold or whatnot. And it is so sad. A lot of people lose their houses and property because they left it to their children, to multiple children, and then those children couldn't agree on what to do. I heard about a case that just breaks my heart. There's a family up near DC. Their parent left them a house that they all grew up in. Parent died without a will, or they may have had a will, but either way, they left it to all of their children. And it was like a rough, you know, how DC used to be and how DC is now. It's very different, but it was how DC used to be when the parent bought the house. So the house was in a neighborhood that, property values were not great. And it was not a place that everybody was flocking to live. But by the time the parent died, like it was happening. I think it was near Georgetown or one of those major universities. And like it was a bustling place. And people were like knocking down doors trying to get property in that area. And so this house, the family ended up just losing it, tax sale or something. And like whoever bought it probably like got, I don't know, 50 times the value, 100 times the value, something ridiculous. Because, there's just no plan in place for how this family should deal with this house. And they just fought and fought and fought and never came to a resolution. And it just went, everybody said, well, forget it, we'll just leave it. And they missed out on hundreds of thousands of dollars. We don't want to do that. So don't unintentionally create heirs property with your estate plan. And we don't have it as much in Macon, but in Atlanta, I had some cases where, that house with parents bought it $50,000 a long time ago, and now it's worth, $300,000, $400,000. So I've seen that. I'm not planning for medical and long-term care expenses is a pitfall. Tax issues, estate income tax, gifting taxes, retirement benefits. Those are all things that if you don't have someone who's knowledgeable about those areas, they can cause you some big issues. And not hiring the right professionals, that can cause you some problems. So I wanted to just mention with the estate tax, I have estate income tax here because most people are not really going to be dealing with the estate death tax right now. So I have stuff on the income tax here. But I need to just move on because I don't know what I was trying to say about it. But a main thing I was saying is I'm not talking about the estate death tax. Even though if your estate is above a certain amount, you do want to start having some planning around that. You want to review your estate plan regularly, at least once a year. If you have a spouse, child, or other individual addressing your estate plan that passes away or becomes disabled, you definitely want to review that plan to make sure it still makes sense. If your community has changed, like the examples I gave earlier of, you were in DC when it was not like the happening spot, and now it's like, hustle and bustle and everybody wants to be there, you might want to consider changes in your estate plan because that's going to impact what you leave behind. And, another example is probably better. You have a farm and you live in a community that's not a farming community anymore. You might want to put some things in place to either preserve it as a farm or to help your family to maximize the benefits of it being in an area that's not for farming, that's not as much of a farming community anymore. You don't want to just have an estate plan that's based on the way things used to be, and then your family get what you leave them and it's not really anything they can benefit from. And if you need to revise your documents, you need to create new documents. You don't want to try to scratch things out and initial like we do with everything else. You need to just create entirely new documents. Finally, you want to protect your estate plan. You want to let the people who need to get access to it. The people that you don't want to get it, you want to keep it out of their reach because you don't want somebody destroying your plan because it's not convenient for them. And you want to consider some places to store it. It might be a safe deposit box at the bank, might be probate court, or you might have a fire and flood proof safe that you keep at home and you want to put your documents there. Other options that people typically do are under the bed, mattress, top drawer. Those can work, but if there was a fire or a flood, they might not work as well. So I've heard people keeping their documents in the freezer. That could be an option because I guess if there's a fire, the freezer doesn't usually burn up. So that could be an option as well. I know it's weird. So if you put it in the freezer, don't just throw it at the bottom and somebody, something be in there and melt and get on there. Like you want to really put it in like a Ziploc bag and protect it. I'm not saying I recommend the freezer, but I've heard it can be a good option. And that's it. So here is my contact information. This is how you can contact me to learn more about my firm. I have here all of my contact information, social media, email, and all that stuff. If you want to schedule a clarity call, the clarity call is like my consultation. So we will talk about your situation and what things we recommend as your next steps and how you can work with our firm. The newsletter, I've heard it is good. People like it. So if you want to join the newsletter, you can QR code and you will be able to get access to the goodies that I send out, ideally every week or every other week, sometimes a little bit less frequently. I don't know if where my screen is will impact whether you can scan that code, but if you want to do that, you can do that. But I'm going to go ahead and close here. What I'm going to do is stop recording, or I want to see if there's any questions. So I'm going to go, I'm going to close out the Zoom and I will go on my platforms to see if anybody has posted any questions or comments in the chat. I'm going to stop my share so y'all can see my face a little bit more. I really have enjoyed doing this conversation. I hope that some people have benefited from the information, got something useful from it. Leave me some comments, please, y'all. I like to talk. I like to hear what people thought and what questions you have. And looking forward to the next one. This is going to be a monthly thing. So we got 2 of them down and we'll just keep on going every month. And just let me know how I can help. Everyone have a great day, and I'm going to stop this stream now.